The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast NH. This is a podcast designed by writers for writers on the journey to being published. Joined Mandra Biscornet.
It was so healthy and nutritious.
Deborah Monk.
Can we open each podcast with a dance number?
Shelly Devlin.
It was so full of inspiration and sparkles.
Every Tuesday morning live on YouTube. And make sure you subscribe to catch the podcast anytime on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, or your favorite podcast catcher. It's time to be inspired, feel empowered, and be well with the Writer's Block Podcast NH.
And welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast. I'm Mandra.
I'm Debbie.
And I'm Shelly.
Thank you for joining us at the Writer's Block, where our mission is to inspire, empower, and to help people be well. Today, we're going to be talking about how to take your writing to the next level, how to become a better writer. And to help us do this, we welcome back Dave Copeland.
Hi.
Nice to have you
I'm so
back.
glad you're here because I want to be better.
Welcome back.
So Dave had previously joined us on the show to discuss his work as a ghostwriter, but Dave also has been a guest visiting lecturer in the Communication Studies Department at Bridgewater State University. He's done that since 2007. He also teaches courses on journalism and digital media, as well as writing classes in that school's English department. He's taught in the expository writing program at Bentley University since 2015. So we are thrilled to have you back and talk about higher education, writing classes, and how we can become better writers.
Great.
Where do we start?
Deb's already got like 47 questions on a page right now.
Well, tell us a little bit about the classes that you teach.
For the most part, I'm teaching at two very different schools. Like Bentley is your $50,000 a year future CEOs of America.
I went to Bentley. When am I getting a raise and a new title?
You can be CEO of the Writer's Block.
You were the rare Bentley student that actually embraced and probably knew how to write, where the rest of them were all math-minded. So I'm dealing with a lot of kids who are graduated at the top of their high school class, but have always found writing the most challenging aspect.
Oh, interesting.
And then Bridgewater State, I'm dealing with a state university school. Sometimes you have kids that probably got into better schools, but this is what they could afford. And then we have a lot of kids who are in college because somebody told them you have to go to college when you finish high school, and they're not really sure where they're there. So those are kind of the two very different student populations I'm dealing with.
Do you think a teacher can make a better writer?
My philosophy for teaching writing is really simple, is that anybody can be a better writer. You just have to read a lot and you have to write a lot. And what a writing teacher does is, leans over your shoulder and forces you to do that. They force you to read a lot, they force you to write a lot, and occasionally says, well, here are all the mistakes I've made in my years of doing this, and don't make these same mistakes.
So I've been around writing a long time. It's been what I've planned to do since long before I grew up. So writing is what I have always planned to be. So the advice, write a lot and read a lot, I completely agree with it. But that to me, okay, I've done a lot of writing, I've done a lot of reading. I am a professional ballroom dancer as well. People can't watch waltz and learn how. Trust me, they've tried. And so you can't just watch and you can't just say, okay, I watched her waltz and now I'm going to waltz.
So you're saying you can't just read and then become a better writer because you've read a lot.
Even right.
Yeah.
Just like if someone watches me waltz and then they waltz for, like Jonathan's a perfect example. He's waltzed with me a million times. It doesn't make him a better waltzer. So how do you get better? Let's say you've done the reading a lot and let's say you've written a lot. How do you still get better?
Well, I should first say that, like any good writer, I totally stole that philosophy from Stephen King. If you read his book on writing, that's basically what he says. Yep. And he lives it, right? They'll show him in between innings at a Red Sox game or during a pitching change, and he's reading because he believes he has to constantly be reading. to get better. And it doesn't really matter. You know, he talks about if he's in line at the bank, he has a book that he pulls out. If he's in his car, he's listening to books on tape. Like, I mean, he's dedicated himself to just constantly reading.
Okay, I have to admit, I just got a vision in my head of Stephen King at the Red Sox putting up Well-Behaved Woman Coming Undone and me getting a picture of it. Oh, sorry, fantasy.
I didn't see it this year during the World Series, but I know the last time they were in the World Series, there were shots of him. And, you know, in between innings, a pitching change, he's pulling out that book and he's reading a page or two.
Okay, so let's say I do agree with that. How else do you get better?
You just do it.
I see.
But it's all perspective,
but that's
Deb,
the
is you're
practice
assuming
step.
that
Like
you
that's,
are a good
that's
writer.
the dancing practice.
Dancing
You
is
have to
different,
do it.
right? Dancing is way, way, way different than, you know, some people just don't possess the physicality. And I mean, I'm not saying that if you're a person who hates writing, if you're one of my Bentley accounting majors
right.
who hates the whole process, that by the end of the semester, you're going to be
Stephen King.
But I am
or Dave
saying
Copeland.
my promise is that if you come in at the start of the semester, stick with me, do what I say, you'll be better than you were at the beginning of the semester.
We've had so many guests on the show that have really just talked about setting your mind or setting your heart to the goal. And if you're reading with the intent of being a better writer, you will become a better writer. If you're writing with the intent to be a better writer, you'll be a better
can't
writer.
help it. I just finished Joyce Maynard's The Story of Us. I think it's her most recent memoir, and it was beautifully written, and I could tell that she had a lyricalness to her writing, and I read it the lines over and over again. I read them out loud. They didn't rhyme. They didn't have stanzas but in my head. So out loud they didn't have rhythm, but in my head they did as I was reading them, and I thought, how does she do that? And you two, I mean, we have a writers group, the three of us, outside of this, where we meet, and I feel like there are times when I'm able to tell you, okay, this is how you will do this better, Mandra, or Shelly, this is what you will do, and you both have said that you're learning. And so I just feel like, okay, once you go to that next level, which whatever that is, I'm one step ahead of you girls, so I can help you with the one step. There are 100 steps above me. I just don't know how to find those people who are going to kind of help me get better. So do you think, we took a writing class.
But aren't there 100 different ways, Dave? There's 100 different ways. If you're going to do the wall step, isn't it like point A to point B, like there are exact steps? Or isn't it like maybe there are different waltzes?
Well,
there's the basic step to the waltz.
Right, the basic step to the waltz. Yeah. So, I mean, there's the basic step to the writing, but it's all under
But do you know how many lessons?
Yeah,
that's the basic step to the waltz, and then all of the coaches that I had that have helped me take my waltz to another level and another level and another level, which is what allowed me to get to make all the finals. I wouldn't have made all the finals if I didn't have those coaches.
But isn't that what happens with writing? You read something and incrementally you store it back in the back of your head, and you work on something and it's a little bit better. I'm sure that we can look at something you wrote 5, 10, 15 years ago and see kind of these things that you would not do now because you progressed. I mean, you're looking for, the magic matrix pill that I give it to you, and, it's, one of the things that I don't think my students realize this when I say it on the first day of class is that it's putting in the work, which you're doing. Not every 18, 19, 20-year-old kid is going to put in that work without me sitting over their shoulder.
Oh, absolutely.
Or 52.
And our writing group is that for me. It's like, okay, we're going to meet. I have to do my pages, so I have my accountability coaches.
You stole the word out of my mouth. Yeah. It's having somebody hold you accountable. And I think at any level, it's good to go back and have somebody, take a writing class. Every once in a while, every few years, I'll just say, this is something I want to try. It's not really my, I don't fancy myself a fiction writer, but I took a novel writing class a couple of years ago just to kind of have somebody to force me to do that.
Was it good?
Yeah.
Who was the teacher?
It was Media Bistro. It was 6 years ago. I don't remember who the teacher was. It was
Media Bistro, okay.
I think writing is a lot more like bodybuilding if you were going to pick an activity, because in bodybuilding, the top tier guys, those top 6 guys, are the guys that work the hardest in the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning when nobody else is there. And if you're going to be a good writer, you're the person who's writing every single second that you can. You're trying to find your inspiration. You're trying to find your muse. You're trying to find better turns of phrase.
But there are clearly ways, when you go to the gym, there are better ways to work out than not.
Of course there's better ways to work out, and this is where the writing group comes into play, where, you may be writing something very...
All right, I need a better writer's group.
But maybe a class, Deb.
But even
You have 4 of them, Deb.
I know.
You're not just in
we
one.
took a writing class.
But was that about the writing?
Well,
or
we
was
thought it
that
was.
about, it sounded like there was also like a lot of talk about publishing and sort of that end of things, not so much about, you're talking about the actual craft. You want to get better at the writing.
Yeah.
So
where would you suggest that a person, so if you're going to Bentley and you're, back in those days in accounting and you need to know how to write business reports, you should take the writing class. Where does a writer who wants to become a better writer go?
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of different ways, right? And not all of us have, once we're out of college, we don't always have the luxury to
Go back to school?
Yeah.
But let's say we did. Where would we go?
Take Dave's class at Bentley.
There's
obviously.
a lot of good writers' retreats. I think that's a good way. I mean, the point I was going to make is that I don't want to be the one that breaks up the band. I think it's great that you have this writing group.
We're in for life.
we can't be
we did a blood thing.
But I also think it's good to, break out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
To maybe go and read in front of an audience or join a group, even on a part-time basis, with people that you don't know. I've always said that I do my best writing when I travel, right? Because when you travel, your eyes are wide open, your brain is just primed to kind of take in these new experiences, whereas my typical life is spend a couple hours drinking coffee, writing, spend a couple hours smoking cigars, writing, go teach a couple of classes, and then go home at the end of the day, right? But, so when I'm driving from my house to, say, here or my house to school, I'm just kind of in my zone. But if I'm driving when I'm traveling, my eyes are wide open, my brain's going 100 miles a minute. It drives my wife crazy that, I sometimes in the middle of vacation, I feel like I got to write this morning. But, that's kind of the thing. It's kind of designing these things to change, our day-to-day world approaching. So when I teach a class, I'm trying to get students, they don't know what to expect when they come in. We're not going to do the same thing day in and day out. That there's going to be different things that are going to, throw a wrench at them, and they're going to have to kind of adapt to that. But the idea is to kind of prime that brain to, think in a different way.
You got a little chaos theory going, which, taking us back to bodybuilding, if you're going to work out a muscle group, you don't work out the muscle group in the same way time after time. You're going to do bicep curls one time.
Now, see, someone would have to learn that. They can't just go to the gym.
But the person that is going to have the mindset of changing up their workout is going to be the person that's going to get better. The writer who changes up their day-to-day life, like Dave is saying, and he did it himself. He took a fiction class so that it forced him to get outside of his comfort zone. He's practicing what he preaches. He may get a little bit out of that teacher, but really I think he's going to get more out of the experience of opening his eyes and doing something different.
And I totally agree with travel. The thing that I like about travel is once you get onto that plane and you buckle your seat in, everything that you have to do in your day, the laundry, you
can't possibly
it's gone. So you're completely clear. You're a blank slate with just a carry-on luggage, and it's you carry on your laptop and nothing else in the world.
Exactly.
So, I have to book a trip.
What are some of the things that you kind of throw at your students to mix things up? Like, is it an exercise or thinking patterns?
Particularly, I mean, I definitely have students, and I've definitely taught writing classes where to undergraduates where they want to be there, they want to be writers. But I think with, the so-called reluctant writers, I'm taking this because the university is making me take this. A lot of it is getting it comfortable with them sharing their work, right? It's reading in front of the class. It's developing kind of this place where they can practice really taking criticism, receiving criticism with realizing that it's not personal. They're not a bad person. There's just ways that we can make this better. And if I'm pointing out the problems with your piece of writing in front of the whole class, the reason I'm doing it is because it's a common problem, and there are other people sitting here who I didn't call on that have the same exact problems. So a lot of it is just this idea of just getting comfortable sharing, because that's ultimately, you're not a writer if you don't have an audience. And I can't be their only audience. They have to get comfortable with other people seeing it as well.
Right.
Interesting.
And you're not going to get better if you don't get that feedback from the other people
Exactly.
in the class.
So, not to you specifically, unless you want to make it that way, can you make a living as a writer?
Yeah, you can. I think it's a lot harder. I always kind
Deb.
curse that scene in Capote where, he's reading from his new book and he's got a sellout crowd of 15,000 people that have all paid to be there, and he's the headlining act.
Did you have a vision of what your writer's life would look like, and does it look like that?
No, it doesn't. I had a vision.
What was your vision?
My vision was, a lot like Capote, spend the winters researching the book and then spend, the summers in Italy writing away in the mornings and then just hanging out in the afternoons. And, I was talking to my wife because like a lot of writers, I'm juggling 4 or 5 different employers at any given time, and 4 or 5 different income streams. And we were talking about this over the weekend because we're trying to figure out if I can drop one of the teaching gigs that I have, which would mean less time in the car and more time working on the stuff that I want to be working on. And so we were talking about, I just kind of, in that moment that you have when you're just kind of I'm 45 and my life hasn't turned out the way I thought it was going to be. I got into writing thinking I wouldn't have a boss. And now I have 5 bosses.
Wow.
So I had this romantic vision, but that being said, I don't know how to do anything else. And this is still better than any other job I've ever had. So I'm not quitting. I'm not, but it is not necessarily what I envisioned it.
Well, a job is a job. It's work. So and listen, I love my job too. I love producing the podcast. I love talking to people about cigars, but every day I go to work and I have to get better at my craft, whether it's producing or learning about different tobaccos and the production methods. So you can't go into your thing if you're going to be a writer and you're going to make a living at this thinking it's not going to be work. It's work.
Well, see, I sent an email to myself last week, which I wouldn't.
You did?
Yeah. Which
You
I
didn't
sometimes
tell us that.
I know. I don't say that very often because sometimes people think that's weird. So I don't really reveal that about myself.
No more weird than crying in the shower.
But anyway,
She did
so
that this
every once in a
morning,
while,
too, I'm sure.
there's something really important, and I send it myself an email so that I will get it and get the message from myself. And I wrote, what if I gave my writing the gift of, I will teach dancing for the rest of my life, and my writing I will never ask you to change, to be anything what you're not. That way you can be whatever you want to be. You can be fully 100 authentic. I never need you to make me money. Mm-hmm. And because I'm just realizing this now, the thing that people have said to me is, well, do you write a thing? Do you write as a hobby? And if you do, that's lovely. You there, dear. You sit home and you write like a hobby. And I don't write like it's a hobby. I give it every single bit of my blood. And so there's this feeling of, well, if it's not, I don't want it to be called a hobby where people pat me on my head and say, isn't that cute? You're a writer. I don't want that. But at the same time, I don't want this business mindset kind of taking over the creativity and the art of my writing.
Deb, you're going to search for that for a long time, my friend.
Search for what?
Fairy tales and butterflies. It's work.
Yeah, and you work for other people. We work for readers readers have fickle tastes that change from year to year. So, a book idea that's horrible this year might be great next year. It might find the right audience, but the point is you don't get to do it this year because when you want to do it, you get to do it next year, maybe if somebody doesn't beat you to that idea. It's work, but there's a lot of other jobs that suck a lot more.
Right.
Suck a lot more.
It sucks
This
less.
ringing endorsement brought to you by
Dave Copeland.
Coperights.com.
No, my wife, she's in an office now, but she works in retail. And when she was a store manager, it's like, well, as bad as my days have been, I usually don't have to call the cops because a customer's threatening me. I don't have to work the day before Thanksgiving.
Or can you, imagine Deb in like a cubicle village, right?
God,
a cubicle village in a corporate. Like you would die. You would shrivel up and die.
I did it for a year while I was training to get into being as a professional dancer, and so I worked in an office. And I remember going in, and they were formaldehyde lights.
Yeah.
I mean, I was literally dying in a glass jar if I had to stay there.
So even if it's maybe not the romanticized vision that you had.
No, but that's not my. No, that is exactly my point. I want the romanticized vision. I'm going to Italy. It was never on my list, but now I want to do it because he said it. No, I take that. Why can't we have that romanticized life? Maybe if I just stay teaching dancing, maybe I can make my writing that life, and it doesn't have to be anything else. You two can sell a lot of books. I'll just write a lot of books.
That'd be great if we did.
Yeah.
I don't.
You didn't get permission to treat him like a hostile witness. I'm just saying. You have to ask permission for that.
I was going to hold her back if she was like lunging anymore towards him, but
No,
grab her sweater.
I want the
tether her.
romanticized.
I think
But you
we were
have
born
it.
too late. I mean, I don't think.
We were
Here's
born too late.
people read less, and now
Yeah.
the bar to become and call yourself a writer is much lower, right? You don't need a publisher to have faith in you. You don't need somebody that buys ink by the barrel to back you. You can turn on your computer and you can start a blog, and some of those people, you can't write a word, but they have loyal followings, and they found that niche and they found that audience, and we're competing with them.
Right.
So, the Truman Capote
That's a
thing,
good
it's a
point.
nice fantasy, but,
It's a really good point.
I can't afford it. I have to continue to work, and a lot of times it feels like I'm working really long hours and grading all these papers so I can continue to write. But again, I don't know what else to do at this point.
Right.
Okay.
In the industry, we
Deb
call
took
that
a breath.
a pregnant pause.
Yes. Took a breath.
Or just the crushing of everybody's dreams.
See, I feel just the opposite. I feel
Tell,
just
good,
the
because we need to
opposite.
end on a high.
Yes,
so tell me how you
absolutely.
feel the opposite. Like, what did you get?
What is on your to-do list? What have you written down there?
Oh, I've written down a lot of things, but just that it's the more that we talk and the more that we share and we meet people who are giving us new ways of thinking, the more I can feel myself kind of tunneling in on what it is I want.
I mean, the other thing about writing is that if you're doing it, you're doing it. I mean, this is one of the few professions where most of what you produce gets thrown away.
Right.
We're sitting here in
Yeah.
the cigar shop, and if, every time, they didn't like the way cigar turned out, they threw out that tobacco that had been grown and aged and cared for all that time, they would be quickly out of business. But we are in the business of most of what we do is practice. Most of what we do is going to never see, the light
Nobody
of
else
day.
is going to ever read.
But, the point is that we've all managed to find an audience, and we're all able to do this to some degree or another. I think it's getting harder and harder. When I'm teaching students, I'm more teaching them writing as a valuable job skill for whatever else they want to do. And occasionally you'll get that kid that really wants to be a writer, and you'll say, okay, I guess you want to be an alcoholic divorcee, but there you go, I'll help you with that dream, but...
And I will admit, when I was walking around the Bentley campus, I did not fit in.
Yeah, you didn't.
I didn't, and I knew I didn't. I remember when we were graduating, they had us all lined up, and they provided job fairs where you would go in and have interviews. And every single girl had on a navy blue suit, a white blouse, and pearl-studded earrings. And I had on a Kelly green suit with a slit up to here and a sash over my shoulder. And the way I remember the story is I was offered every single job I interviewed for.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't take any of them because I knew I could feel that there was a quicksand suck into corporate America that didn't suit me, and I didn't belong there. And I was rock climbing when I was in college, and so I used to wear spandex. So when we were walking through classes, from class to class, and all the kids are in, there were not many other girls wearing spandex and long sweaters and Rocky wrestling sneakers. That was my favorite college outfit. So you can see, I didn't really belong there.
There's, that's the right school for people that want to have careers in business. In
accounting, yep.
But these days we have a term for students like you, and we call them likely transfer students.
Good one. I do have a degree. I have a degree from Bentley. But it was probably no, I did fine.
No, it's great, but I mean, the emphasis more, I actually think the model works because they don't make students go through, this is what you want to do, so we're going to spend most of the time focusing on this, where, my own liberal arts education was like, we know you want to do this, but now you have to take all these classes that
don't relate.
And there's a value to that. I don't want to totally discredit that with 30 seconds left when I don't have to elaborate on it, but I think this idea that we're living in this system now where go to college and you get a better job, Bentley has really positioned itself that we're going to make sure you're prepared for that job. And so my job as a writing instructor at Bentley is to just show the students that here's the value of this skill that I'm teaching you. I know you're
within
not going to go
that confines of that career
and have these, discussions about how come you can't sit there and write all day, but I'm going to teach you how to write effectively when you do have
when
to
you
do
do
it.
need to do it and have that
So
skill
I
anyway.
think the big takeaway here is that you can make writing what you want to make it. Maybe in Deb's case, she wants that fairyland dream world of writing, and more power to you. And in Dave's case, you're nose to the grindstone, and you're banging out pieces when you need to make the money, and this is how you earn your living. And when you're not doing that, you're teaching so that you can afford to do the things you want to do.
And then hopefully have the time at some point to write your
projects
and work on your ideas and projects. Yeah.
But I've gotten into a place where, I'm home at night. I'm not, working late and missing, I have a 2-year-old, I'm not missing swim lessons or things like that almost, so
that's a payoff. And,
there's
give and take.
There's certain benefits beyond kind of the creative satisfaction that I get from this job that I wouldn't get in other jobs necessarily.
Right, and you make money at it, which I barely do. So that's a big difference too.
And you can dance the waltz, which I can barely walk without tripping. So there you go.
We all have our skills, and I make money doing that.
Skills.
Right.
Yes. Well, thank you, Dave, for coming back on.
You.
This was great. If you'd like to contact Dave or see more about what he does, you can go to his website at copewrites.com. Thank you for listening, and thank you to the Studio 21 Podcast Café. Please check out the Writer's Block NH Facebook and the Writer's Block podcast on your favorite podcast catcher. If you'd like to hear this episode again or share it with a friend, head to the UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. That's UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. You can find this episode and all previous episodes at the UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. Thank you again for listening. May you be inspired, feel empowered, and be well.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.